All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Mild Takes with We Ain't Got No History. My name is David. For those unfamiliar, this is a sarcastic blog title. We don't actually say we don't have history, but we're taking it back and owning it. Welcome, Rom. First one as always. So we're here to talk a little bit about last night's rather amusing, in the end, 1-1 draw, plus extra time, plus penalty kick shootout that finally saw Chelsea win and advance to the FA Cup fourth round. It's unclear to me whether we're counting this as a win or another draw. If it's another draw, it's our fifth in a row. That doesn't happen very often. Unlike the previous three, we at least scored a goal, so got that to be happy about. We also conceded a late goal again, which is something that we should not be happy about. This seems to happen a lot, especially with old Willie Caballero, who I think has now conceded a goal past the 90th minute in every single one of his 5 Chelsea appearances, or however many he has made. So that's a bit interesting and annoying in a way. In a way, it was also coming because we could never put the game out of reach after finally scoring that first goal. All right, we're already talking about ambition here from Ishmael. What is the club's ambition if you buy Barkley and Carroll? Well, I think our ambition. I think our ambition. There's nothing wrong with our ambition. I think the problem lies really with possibly not making the best choices in the transfer market. I don't know if Carroll is going to happen. It kind of sounds like it's going to. Barkley, I think, is mostly a bargain that we've jumped on. We wanted to buy him in the summer. It didn't quite work out. So now we managed to get him at a discount, and I think that doesn't necessarily play into your ambition. Signing Andy Carroll could certainly speak to it, especially when another 29-year-old, namely Alexis Sanchez, is available. But as we've seen, Alexis's financial commitment is something that Chelsea can't really afford without actually kind of affecting future years as well. And arguably, Carroll is what the team needs a bit more than Alexis. I know that sounds weird, but after yesterday, say trying to watch Batshuayi attempt to play center forward as our supposed backup for Morata was at times rather painful. So if Carroll is somebody who can come in and do the job that Batshuayi has repeatedly failed to do for Conte, that's something that if we can do it at a non-outrageous price, that's certainly something that we should be looking at. I think it would involve. Carroll coming would obviously involve Batshuayi leaving, at least on a loan, and there are plenty of rumors of him going to Sevilla. Possibly there could be an exchange with Carroll, considering that David Moyes was at the game last night, and kind of everybody assumed that he was watching Batshuayi, although it's unclear if he was impressed at all. That said, Batshuayi did score our one and only goal, our first goal in over 5 hours. So, that should be credited for that one. Goal created by young Kennedy, who got the start as he usually does in early cup rounds, and played pretty well. I thought certainly pulled off the move of the game with his his shoulder leg control and then elastico through the legs of who was it, like Ivo Pinto, I think it was, from Norwich, stealing his soul and all that good stuff. So nice move there by Kennedy, paying homage to Ronaldinho, who of course officially retired yesterday. In case you haven't heard, legend of the game. Anyway, somebody says Morata is garbage. That's a little harsh. But he did add to his collection of missed chances yesterday. which he better snap out of those right quick here. And yesterday he even missed headers, so who knows? Maybe this is finally rock bottom here for Morata in terms of finishing. But he might have missed a couple chances there, but at least he was there to miss him. And I know that's a weak argument, but our attack looked way better once he came on for Batshuayi. Whether that was coincidence, whether Norwich got tired, it's undeniable. I think especially based on yesterday's evidence, that our attack looks much better with Morata. He just needs to find his finishing touch once again. We need to sign a striker in this window, says Summer. Good name. I think the two avenues we appear to be exploring pretty strongly this January is backup striker and backup left back. Carroll is not an inspiring signing, but might be a needed one or a necessary one, assuming he can stay healthy and actually contribute. If he can't, then that's a giant waste of money and everyone's time. There's rumor for a left back of Roma left back Emerson, who, like most other players we appear to be signing these days, is coming off of an injury or is injured. Emerson had a knee ligament injury in the summer. He's managed to recover from that. Kind of reminds us of Rudiger, who did something similar, also signed for Roma. Of course, Carroll was battling an injury. Drinkwater was battling an injury. Bakayoko was battling an injury. So maybe we should sign somebody at some point who is not in the middle of an injury at this point. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So keep your eyes on the Carroll and Emerson deals possibly going down in the next, was it the 18th today? The window closes on the 31st. So a little under 2 weeks to get all that done and find the suitor for Batshuayi. But anyway, so the game itself, we were back to the 3-4-3. Basically, this almost the exact same lineup that battled to this nonsense 0-0 draw in the first time we played Norwich at Carroll Road. The same front seven, certainly. Batshuayi center forward, Pedro, Willian either side of him, Kennedy, Zappacosta as wingbacks, Drinkwater and Bakayoko in the center of the pitch. Back three, we were trying out something new, at least as far as I can recall. We had Captain Azpilicueta on the left, David Luiz back in the middle, and Ethan Ampadu, 17-year-old Ethan Ampadu, making his fifth appearance. So that was nice to see. This collection of players certainly hasn't played together, I don't think, as a back three. And they were decent, I suppose. I don't know if Azpilicueta is really that well utilized on the left. We use him a lot for his ball carrying and ball playing capacity as well in this formation, and that putting him on the left is kind of restricts him for that. But perhaps he was more trusted there on his weak side than Ampadu would have been. Either way, I think they did all right. David Luiz possibly fell asleep on Norwich's equalizer, but hey, that kind of happens. That happens with David Luiz, of course. And we had Willy Caballero as goalkeeper, as our cup goalkeeper, as always. Our formation attacks are becoming too predictable, says Michael. It's great to see Ampadu start. I think he's had a great future. I think Conte agrees with him, or he agrees with you. Of course, Conte will always say some nice things about players, but he's saying this player is very important for our future, etc., etc. But he is just 17, and to expect a straight line career development would mean ignoring previous history at Chelsea. Ampadu's probably best chance is kind of following the Christensen model, where he stays with the team for a while, gets qualified as a homegrown player, then goes out on loan for a couple of years, and then when he's turns 20, early 20s, he comes back and takes his spot in the first team. So that's good start for Ampadu, but probably shouldn't shouldn't get our hopes up too much. The one young player that everybody wanted to see in this game but didn't because he wasn't in the squad was Callum Hudson-Odoi. And he wasn't just completely ignored. Hudson-Odoi was playing at the exact same time for the under-18s who were playing in the FA Youth Cup. And the under-18s, unlike the senior side, had zero problem scoring goals. They scored roughly 7, I believe, and Hudson-Odoi might have scored one as well. So that's pretty standard. Anyway, so that was Chelsea in a 3-4-3. You might say it's predictable, but part of the reason we were so good last year was because we really knew how to play with a specific setup, with a specific formation and player relationships. Now, obviously, some teams found that out, most notably Spurs and Arsenal kind of. But part of the problems this year was it has been kind of the constant rotation of players, switching around of systems from the 3-4-3 to the 3-5-2. And as beneficial as it might be to be able to play that many slightly different tactical looks, you don't get any consistency. So I'm not sure if if we're being too predictable. I think we're just not really executing as well as we could have, as we can. As far as trying like a 4-3-3, I'm not really seeing a 4-man defense in Chelsea's future unless it's like an in-game adjustment. Like today, we adjusted to a 4-man backline for a while, well, namely a couple minutes towards there at the end after Morata. Was it Morata? Pedro got sent off. Pedro was the first one to get sent off. It's tough to keep track. There's so many sending offs. Norwich also kind of went with a 3-4-3 just as they did last time. Basically the same players. Who knows? Who cares really? The players that some of us cared about was James. Is it James Maddison? I forget his name. Yeah, James Maddison playing sort of a withdrawn center forward for Norwich. Jacob Murphy, whom we might remember from an FA Youth Cup a few years ago. One of the few FA Youth Cups that Chelsea did not win in the last decade was when we lost to Norwich. And Jake Murphy, who actually I think was either a Chelsea trainee at one point or just a Chelsea fan, he was a key player for them. So good to see all young Jake Murphy make it to the Norwich first team there. Anyway, it's increasing calls for a 4-man defensive line. I don't know. I think we're kind of wedded to this 3-man setup with the wingbacks. I know Conte tried the 4-man defensive setup when he first got here. We were playing the 4-2-4, and then we started the season in a 4-3-3. I'm not really sure he trusts any of our center backs to play just 2. That doesn't trust him that much, I don't think. And we were kind of developing Christensen to be the sort of sweeper in the middle. Same thing with David Luiz. And I think Azpilicueta actually this role as a right-sided center back truly suits him. Much more than an actual fullback role, which he would have to play probably in a 4-man defensive setup. Other than this silly goal we conceded today, I don't think conceding goals really has been that much of an issue for us. So I don't really see a need to change the defensive system. Last year when Conte switched from 4-3. The entire motivation behind that was to shore up defensive issues. He was saying we were conceding at least 2 goals in every game, so he wanted to try something. He needed to switch to something different. So he switched to the 3-man defensive line, and we're off and running. The problem really now isn't conceding goals; it's scoring goals or at least converting chances. And I'm not really sure if he'd be willing to sacrifice that defensive solidity, which we've kind of continued to maintain. It's the goal Today, the only time really that Norwich threatened were when Batshuayi gave the ball away, and then Drinkwater gave the ball away, and Caballero made a mistake on a cross and gifted them kind of an extra shot that Ampadu deflected onto the post. That was it. The equalizer was a kind of a breakdown as well, with nobody closing down the crosser of the ball. That's Zappacosta, and David Luiz just kind of letting the wing back, was it the left wing back, just kind of drift into space. In fairness, that nobody kind of expected that player to score or head the ball. I think his own coach even made fun of him. He wasn't even facing the goal; it just kind of hit him on the head and looped in. It was first career professional goal for Lewis, whoever he is. So, yeah, it was a long story. Where I'm trying to go with this is I don't think the defensive setup is the issue, and thus I don't think Conte is considering changing that part of the system. I think he's definitely looking to improve our attack. He's continually started to mention converting chances, which sometimes is luck, sometimes is skill, but it's become as much of an issue these days that is starting to possibly veer out of the territory of luck and into skill, and we need to figure out how to unlock that. As Batshuayi had a nice finish, but didn't really do much else beyond that. Morata in his cameo did plenty of things, but then the finishing wasn't there. So we need to find somebody who can do both, or in form at least. The other things that Conte came out pretty harshly on, at least for him, he's not one to really criticize players after matches. But he did say there's positives because obviously we won, but he was none too pleased with Pedro's dive, which is now his second time he's got punished this season, I believe, for a dive, and second time he's been sent off for two yellow cards. Surprisingly, it's actually the first two times he's ever been sent off in his career. They're both this season, and both pretty similar in a way. This one, not much controversy about the yellow for his dive. That was pretty clear. And then the second yellow he got was he kind of took one for the team because he had to go play left wing back, and he was trying to stop a counter, so he slid him from behind, and that's a pretty clear yellow card. Morata's sending off is a whole other can of worms. That's we're touching into VAR territory at this point, which probably we could sit here and talk about it all day, all evening, whatever time it might be in your time zone. But basically, Morata, towards the very end of the second extra period, drove into the box, felt some contact on his shoulder, which there was. The defender put his arm on his shoulders. As players tend to do, he went down. There was enough, the defender definitely put his arm on his shoulder and pulled him back. Seen him give him, seen him not give him. It was a pretty 50-50 call. It was one of those where if it happens outside the penalty area, it's almost always going to be a foul. If it happens inside the penalty area, suddenly there is a higher threshold you have to clear for some reason. So sometimes it doesn't result in a foul. What it certainly almost never results in is a yellow for diving, which Graham Scott, whoever he would be, the name of the referee, decided it was a dive. The third time in the game he would book a Chelsea player for a dive. Only one of those was actually a dive. So maybe go back and review some incidents there, Mr. Graham Scott. So he brandishes the yellow for Morata. Morata does his little hissy fit turn thing. Understandably enough, it was, he could think it's a bad call. It's unclear to me whether he was just yelling at the ref or if he made, kind of like a VAR motion or asked them to review VAR, which theoretically has to be a yellow card offense per the rules of the VAR system. Either way, The referee quickly gave him a second yellow and sent him off. So Morata and Pedro are suspended for Brighton coming up on Saturday, which is unfortunate because it actually kind of really limits our attacking options. If only Morata had been suspended, then Conte quite clearly would just go with the three attacking midfielders. If Pedro was only suspended, then we just roll out the 3-5-2 and play Hazard and Morata. Now, I don't know. Could we possibly see a Batshuayi start for the Premier League before he gets loaned out to Sevilla? Wouldn't that be something interesting? Somebody was mentioning, I don't know why we don't play Batshuayi and Morata up front. That's something that's been brought up repeatedly this season, and your guess is as good as mine. The only thing I can think of is that Conte really, really, really doesn't like Batshuayi that much for whatever reason, and I don't know. At a loss. We've maintained for Batshuayi ever since he got here that he is a better striker in a two-striker setup than a lone striker or this sort of three-man forward line where he has to play a target man. His initial success at Chelsea was when he came on as a substitute and played with Costa, kind of being the aerial threat to Costa's ground threat, and that kind of actually worked out fairly well a couple times in those early games for Conte, and then we never really used that again. Part of it was because Costa was scoring a lot of goals, but who knows? But yeah, Batshuayi and Morata would have been interesting to see at some point throughout these past 6 months. I don't think it's in the cards, but maybe. Certainly something worth trying. Chuck says, Pedro dive, Willian pen, Morata no pen, no yellow. I think that seems to be the general consensus. I've not seen anybody argue that Pedro's wasn't a dive. I did make the joke that he should just claim that he slipped, kind of like Juan Mata did just the other day. He did a very similar dive to Pedro's where nobody touched him. He just kind of went down. And then supposedly he was like, oh, no, I just slipped. Sorry, nobody slips this way, but I slipped. Plus, I'm Juan Mata, so I'm super, nice, and everybody believes me. So there's Juan Mata got away with that one. Pedro didn't, which is fair enough. The Willian thing is a nailed-on penalty, and everybody except the referee, the VAR, whoever was manning the VAR console, and then the two commentators who we had the pleasure to listen to on Fox here in the States, namely Martin Tyler and Stuart Robson, those are about the four people who didn't think it was a penalty. Most tellingly, the person who thought it was a penalty was the guy who committed the foul, Tim Klose, not related to the other Klose. But, so both defender, Willian, everybody thought it was a foul. And what was truly, when it happened, it was funny because it happened, everybody thought it was a foul, referee didn't think it was a foul, and he booked Willian, so we thought, okay, that's fine. This is why we have the VAR, right? This is the whole point. That's why we do video assistant, whatever, refereeing. He's supposed to review this. This is one of the four things that they can actually review. Penalty decisions, clear and obvious errors. I couldn't even possibly tell you that if they reviewed it or not. Supposedly they reviewed the Morata thing later, which would have been interesting if they decided that it was actually a penalty. Like, do you call back the player for the first yellow? This is unclear. But, everybody thought the Willian yellow would be taken back. Can you do that? Who knows? But at least we thought we would get awarded the penalty there. That was pretty clear. There you go. VAR failure. After yesterday, there was a goal for Leicester by Iheanacho that was first ruled out for supposed offside, and then it was given because he was actually onside, and they reviewed it, and everybody was like, oh my god, VAR is amazing. The future is here. Alas, the future is not here. The future is still terrible, and this VAR system really needs to be sorted out as to what it can and can't do. etc., etc. So yeah. So Willian penalty for sure, and of course it's because it's a yellow card. We cannot actually review any of these incidents thanks to the FA's stupid rules that do not allow uh, teams to challenge yellow card decisions later, or review like a red card would be. You could appeal a red card, you can't appeal a yellow card. So there you go. And because both Pedro and Morata got sent off for 2 yellows, as or SOL as they say. So yeah, let's see. Other notable things that occurred in this game was Chelsea used a 4th substitution for the first time in team history. And that was Eden Hazard coming on for Danny Drinkwater in the 100th minute. Since a couple years ago, they instituted a new rule where you can make a 4th substitution in extra time. And so there we go. That was our making history there, Eden Hazard. As Eden Hazard likes to do. Is Willian suspended? No, Willian is not suspended. Willian only got a yellow, so that's... And I don't believe it's anywhere near his 10th yellow, which is what it would take to get him suspended. So it's probably an inconsequential yellow as far as those things go, but the fact that we didn't get the penalty for it is one of those that, it's a game-changing decision. You might say, oh, well, it's just a championship side. We shouldn't need penalties or a penalty kick to beat them, but it's part of the game. I mean, part of the reason we won the penalty is because we, especially in extra time, we definitely outplayed the team, and they stopped our attack in an illegal manner by fouling the guy inside the penalty area just before he was about to shoot. So, you could say, yeah, we shouldn't need it, and sure, we should score lots of goals from open play. But it's all part of the game flow. You're taking a goal off the board. It's one of those things where Chelsea had a couple of chances early. If we score those, the game turns out quite differently. That's just how it goes. Everything. It's football is one of those games where everything kind of builds on the previous event. There are other games, especially here in the U.S., like American football or baseball, where events are slightly more discrete. So just because something happens in a previous inning, say in baseball, doesn't really necessarily affect things that happen later. In a way they do. There's affects pitching or whatever, but it's not one continuous flow in football or even basketball, things more open flowing sport. It's all everything builds on one thing or another. So when a bad decision like that changes the game or changes the game from where it should be, it all makes an impact and has an effect on how the game turns out. So yeah, but no, Willian is not suspended. Should Batshuayi start against Brighton? I'm not really seeing what else we can do. So yeah, I kind of hope that he does. Whether it's his last game of the season for Chelsea before his loan, or whether this is going to be the making of him, and suddenly he scores a hat trick, and we stop this Andy Carroll nonsense and keep Batshuayi around, and we all live happily ever after. But yeah, I hope he starts. But I've hoped Batshuayi to start many times already this season, and he hasn't. Of course, I also hoped that Batshuayi would play really well, and he also hasn't, such as yesterday. So yeah, I don't know. It's the part of the problem is that the Brighton game's coming up on Saturday, and that's 2 days of rest. This game went really long. It started late because of tube issues on the district line. So it was delayed to an 8 p.m. kickoff instead of 7:45. Doesn't make too much difference, but the extra 30 minutes plus penalty kicks. So the game ended a good hour, if not later than it should have ended. So that already eats away into that. it's a pretty quick turnaround. And while some players like Hazard only played 20 minutes, that's not a big deal. Conte only played basically the extra period, as did Morata, plus 10 minutes. Christensen. But of course, Morata's suspended, so never mind that. But Christensen and Conte, it should not affect their fitness. But yeah, so and like Nishan says, there's no Pedro. So yeah, I mean, basically at this point, we have we have four attacking players to choose from. We have Batshuayi, Hazard, Willian, and Musonda, if you want to be generous. I think we can assume that Charlie Musonda is not going to start a league game. That leaves three players. If we play a 3-4-3, then I can see a Hazard, Batshuayi, Willian front line. If we're playing a 3-5-2, I'm not even sure Batshuayi has ever played in a 3-5-2 for Conte. And I'm not really sure we should try that. So, yeah. So, I guess process of elimination, maybe Hazard, Willian, and Batshuayi is your starting front three for Brighton. Unless we sign Carroll. Why are we interested in Carroll? Says Adam. It is a very good question. Actually, the why is possibly the easiest part to answer, just basically because the best way we've been able to, most consistent way we've been able to score this season is through headers. We all know the Azpilicueta to Morata connection, a couple other crosses in, and somebody like Andy Carroll, who's basically a battering ram. He's not that good at many things, but the one thing he's really good at is being a really big player, big striker, who can play like a big man, occupy several defenders. I mean, he's done that against us several times, surprisingly. He's not going to dribble around anybody, but he's going to attack the ball in the area and probably score a few goals. Sometimes he might even pull off a bicycle kick, but he's mostly going to score a lot of headers, is the theory. We have players who can supply him crosses, and putting on somebody like him late in the game after defenders are tired is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. It doesn't sound very glamorous, but it's pretty similar to what Mourinho used to do all the time back in like 2013 and 2014, when he would just put on Demba Ba or Drogba or all these, basically Mourinho, when we were down, his move would be to take off one of the fullbacks, go to three at the back, put on another striker, put on another striker, put on another striker. You'd end up with like Torres, Ba, and Eto'o. I mean, talk about an uninspiring trio of forwards, but, it's put a big man up there, put a strong man up there. It's not the worst idea. So that's the why. It's kind of it's understandable. And if you look at the other forwards that we've been linked with strongest or strongly, such as Christian Benteke, Fernando Llorente, even this Richmond Boakie, whoever he is, they're all of a pretty similar type. The tall, strong target man who can knock a ball down, hold the ball up, bring others into play. And so this seems to be a Conte thing. If we're being honest, this is probably his request to the board, and they're trying to do their best. The problem is there's not too many players who kind of fit that role, who would be happy to be a backup, to play a rotation, whatever. So Andy Carroll, as what happens, or what's a bonus for him too, is that he's homegrown English, so he doesn't take up a foreign squad spot either in the Premier League or the Champions League. I mean, it's kind of it doesn't look good, doesn't sound good, but it kind of makes some sense in a way. What doesn't make sense is spending a lot of money on Andy Carroll. Not only is he perpetually injured, seemingly anyway, but he's also getting up there in age. He's 29. I mean, he can barely stay fit at 29. I don't think that's going to improve as he gets into his 30s. So, like, when the rumors say we're ready to spend $35 million on Andy Carroll, then everybody should definitely run for the hills and stop whoever's pulling those strings at Chelsea as much as we can. Latest rumors say the price is now closer to 20, which I guess in today's market is acceptable. It's still not something I'm too enthused about. I like the initial rumors that said we were looking to loan him for the rest of the season. I mean, if we can pull that off, that would be the most ideal, making the best of a worse situation, really. So, but that doesn't seem to be something that West Ham are willing to do, which is understandable. I mean, if I'm assuming they would want to get rid of Andy Carroll because they're not really playing him, and they're probably paying him a decent amount of money. Yeah. So I mean, the why kind of makes sense. The who is certainly an issue for many, and the how, as in how much money we're about to spend on this, is not cool. I mean, I guess I can see him, $20 million. You sign him for a 3-year contract. It's pretty standard terms. I guess we can possibly live with that, but yeah, not too excited by this. So I'm hoping that Batshuayi scores a hat trick against Brighton, and suddenly everybody lives happily ever after. As been pointed out, I did forget about Ross Barkley. How could I forget about Ross Barkley? So maybe Ross Barkley is the wild card for Brighton, and we start with Barkley. I was pretty sure that Conte kind of ruled out a start for him, but who knows? It could be dire, emergency situation. Barkley might be needed to be pressed into action right away. So maybe we would do a Barkley, Hazard, Willian. The new front three, just to spite Batshuayi once again. If Barkley gets the start ahead of Batshuayi against Brighton, I think that we can probably seal that envelope on Michi and wish him good luck as to wherever his next loan might take him. Hopefully, it's just a loan. There's been some rumors that whoever wants to sign Batshuayi might want to do it as a permanent signing. One of Germany's tabloids said that Borussia Dortmund might be this mystery team, which of course would mean that the dominoes would fall rather unappealingly where we sign, or where United sign Alexis, Arsenal sign Aubameyang to replace Alexis, Dortmund signed Batshuayi to replace Aubameyang, and we end up with Andy Carroll. Yes! I mean, if that doesn't get you excited, I have no idea what will. So yeah, but that's just Germany's equivalent of the Sun, who came up with that, i.e. Bild. So we can probably ignore that, and I certainly will choose to ignore it until reality strikes, which hopefully it won't. Yeah. Alright, Bakayoko out. Bakayoko was actually pretty decent yesterday, I thought. Nothing, certainly not our worst performer, which probably should be a cause for celebration because he has been, on several occasions, been our worst performer. So, hey, improvement for old Timi Bakayoko. He didn't even always give the ball away yesterday. Alright, so that's, I think, is going to just about wrap it up for us. I think we've touched on most everything. Carroll, Alexis. Yes, Alexis going to Manchester United for some outrageous amount of money. The Telegraph's Matt Law had an exclusive of all the financial commitment that United are pouring into this deal, which comes out to about £180 million over the next 4.5 years. which translates to about 30 plus million hit on financial fair play, which is about 50% higher than any one of Chelsea's players, which is Morata at this point. And certainly a lot higher than Hazard or any of those guys who've been here for a while, and so their FFP financial fair play hit kind of lowers every time they sign a new contract. So long story short, United are paying well over the odds for Alexis. It's a good move for them, obviously in the short term. Let's check back in a year or two and see where they're at, having committed that much money to through Alexis's 33rd birthday. It's he could be one of those guys that plays really well into his mid-30s, but that's not necessarily a thing that a lot of attacking players do. So he's a good player at 29, a great player at 29. Is he going to be a good player at 33? Probably. Is he going to be a 30 million a year player at 33? Probably not. So it's a good move. Obviously, possibly a desperate move for United in short term. It's going to improve their team. There's no doubt about that. But it's something that will define their team for the next couple of years, or at least it would define. If Chelsea spent that much money on Alexis, it would certainly define us for the next couple of years. It's a bit like Torres in a way. We spend so much money on Torres too. You're kind of tied your boat to the Torres buoy, and you hope for the best. For United, it's a little easier because they have a lot more money, a lot bigger turnover than Chelsea do, and so they can afford to spend record amounts on Pogba and record amounts on Alexis and that sort of stuff, that sort of things. So it won't affect them that much. It won't affect United as much as it would have affected Chelsea. But still, in a long term, it's a highly questionable deal for them. Thoughts on Emerson? Well, I admit I don't know much about Emerson other than what I've read from others who I follow. Most people, or most of those guys, seem to be not too down on him. Let's put it that way. I've seen some really positive things about him, at least before his knee injury. He's supposedly, a pretty good two-way player. Young, just 23. The knee injury obviously is concerning, but he's made his comeback from that. His price seems to be right to what Chelsea like to pay in these situations. Mid-20s to 30 million euro or so. In here as well, there was a possibility of a loan already floated by Chelsea. Like a loan to buy, which is a very, very Italian style arrangement for transfers. So maybe Roma would be open to that, but possibly not. The bigger point being that that's a position that we definitely need to reinforce. I mean, Kennedy played well enough yesterday, I think, but it's not necessarily something that I'm comfortable with going forward still. And Kennedy needs more minutes than the cup games will afford him. The League Cup is basically over at this point for Kennedy. I don't think he's going to play in the second leg against Arsenal or in the final if you make it that far. So he has maybe a couple of games left in the FA Cup for the rest of the season, and that's probably not a good situation for him. So he needs to go out on loan and get some minutes, and we need to get a backup at that position that we can actually use in tougher games than Norwich or whatever. So in that sense, I think Emerson's okay. He was also, last season, Emerson was mentioned fairly often as a potential replacement for Alexandro at Juventus. So if we're not signing Alexandro, perhaps the next best thing to do is to sign the player they would have signed to replace Alexandro. Go straight to the source and go with that. So maybe Emerson. I don't know. It's a pretty low key rumor at this point, but everybody seems to be confirming that we're interested. Whether that means anything or not, I mean, we'll find out next couple of weeks. Why don't we go for Sturridge? Sturridge is kind of, well, he doesn't fit the mold. So I think, if we're looking for the target man, Sturridge is not a target man. He's a good player, but he also has his injury issues. So he doesn't feel a need, and he's also perpetually injured. I think that kind of explains why we're not going for Sturridge. Yeah. I mean, I like Sturridge, but that's mostly just because he spent a couple years here. Emerson versus Tejas. Alex Tejas, if you had to pick one. Well, I think Tejas has the larger or better pedigree, but that's all I know. Tejas also has a buyout, I believe, in the low 30s. So, Emerson would be a little cheaper, although I'm not so sure the price difference would make that much, would really enter into the decision-making process on choosing one or the other. It possibly could be if Roma are willing to deal with us, especially if they're willing to do a loan. I think that would be a very nice deal, a very nice solution for us. Just like a Carroll loan would be a pretty good solution. Unfortunately, there's probably not. We shouldn't count on that. Let's say nobody's gonna do us a favor like that. I don't think, because why should they? If I had to pick one, I'd pick Tejas just because he's a bigger name, and he looks really good on his stats. There's one of our writers did a stat breakdown. Now, obviously, stats aren't the end all be all of anything, but he looks good on the eye test, and he looks good on the stat charts from what few stats we have available. So I'd pick him, but from what I've read. Around Emerson, I don't really have any issues with him as a backup either. Yeah, I think I'd be all right with either one as long as we sign somebody. I think somebody decent, I should say, before we go for bring back Roberto Carlos from retirement or something. What about an Aubameyang Batshuayi swap deal? That would be pretty exciting. I don't think Aubameyang fits the profile that Conte is looking for, but if that deal is available to us, that might be something where the club overrides the manager and says, we're getting you this player, and you better play him because he's going to be awesome. Yeah. I mean, that would be pretty sweet. I think Dortmund fans would possibly not be too happy about that swap deal, because you're not going to get the same type of play and the same level of play out of Batshuayi as you would out of Aubameyang. So, not to mention the price difference. I mean, Aubameyang supposedly is a 60 million euro striker. Don't think anybody's going to be paying 60 million for Batshuayi anytime soon. So, just swapping him, I mean, that's just in the financials like that, you got to do it. But yeah, I don't think that's a realistic thing. I just hope he doesn't go to Arsenal because he might actually make them a threatening entity. Any chance Morata red card can be cancelled? I don't think so. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but because the Morata red was a second yellow, and you cannot challenge yellow cards, or you cannot appeal yellow cards for the FA. Even if it was a mistake. It's just like we cannot appeal Williams' yellow, and we cannot appeal Pedro's red. Not that we should, because they were both pretty clear yellow card offenses. But yeah, you're kind of stuck. Plus, it's one game. If you launch an appeal now, there's no way they're even gonna decide before Saturday is here. So, it's one of those situations you gotta grin and bear it. Conte was actually. When he was talking about after the game, he called out Pedro for diving. He didn't really call out Morata for a dive, which probably wasn't a dive, but he called him out for his reaction, which is now the second time that Morata collected a yellow at the end of a game that made him miss the following game, and some that's kind of throws Conte's plans into disarray. He got that yellow for celebrating against Bournemouth, and that was his fifth yellow the first out of the season, so he was suspended for a game, and now he's suspended for this game, and both times they're for reactions that are not have anything to do with the actual football. So Conte was saying, we got to control our emotions a little better, which is a bit ironic coming from old Antonio there on the sidelines. But you gotta be smart. You can't just when Morata, he needs to understand that the referee yesterday was basically looking for an excuse to book anybody at that point. He booked 3 players for diving. When does that happen? He was on a bit of a power trip there, old Graham Scott. Unfortunate reaction there from Morata. Ian says, really think we're going to struggle to hold on to fourth. There's nothing convincing in our setup, and unfortunately we'll be manager hunting again. Yeah, it's easy to get down at this point. We've scored 1 goal in 4 games and haven't won a game in regulation in 5 tries now. But shouldn't forget that we were going pretty well before then. So if we can fix this power outage on the front line, so to speak, I think we'll be fine. I don't think any of the other contenders are as strong as people are suddenly making them out to be. Liverpool beat Manchester City, so now suddenly everybody's on the Liverpool bandwagon again. Greatest team, this proper football. This is how you should be playing it, etc., etc. But just because they beat them 4-3, they should. If they play that game for 10 more minutes, there's no way Liverpool's actually winning that game because City were storming back. But suddenly Liverpool are once again the Liverpool media's darlings. Arsenal are already basically adrift of the top 4. Don't think if they get Aubameyang, maybe they mount a usual late season comeback, but not too much to worry about there at this point. I don't think. Spurs are Spurs. We can trust that they'll put the pressure on and then fail at the end. And United, they might get second. They probably will get second, but I think we'll slot in at either 3rd or 4th, hopefully at least 3rd. I don't think it's going to be that much of a struggle. I think we're going to get out of this slump here and get back to actually winning games, not just drawing. Prediction for Saturday, 0-0. That seems it's pretty solid prediction at this point, right? Survey says it's the odds-on favorite scoreline for the rest of the season, 0-0. I don't know. I don't like to make predictions because inevitably they'll be wrong. But hopefully, say 2-0. We'll get a goal early. Hold on to that through the first half, and then get a goal early second half, and make it a straightforward win to set us up nicely for the Arsenal second leg in the League Cup. That's my hope. Possibly a little too idealistic. And it'll be another 0-0. Hey, another clean sheet. Hooray. Hooray, hooray. I hope you're right, says Ian. Me too. Alright, on that hopeful note, I think we're gonna call it a stream, call it a live video, whatever you want to call it. So 1-1 last night in extra time for Chelsea against Norwich, and then Chelsea immaculate, perfect penalty shootout, beat Norwich City 5-3 on penalty kicks. Willian, David Luiz, Azpilicueta, N'Golo Kante, and Eden Hazard with the 5 for 5 for Chelsea. Caballero saves Norwich's first penalty from Nelson Oliveira, and then the rest of it didn't matter. Madison, Vrancic, and Josh Murphy all scored. I think I was calling him Jake Murphy earlier. There was a Jake Murphy too. There's a Josh Murphy and a Jake Murphy. Anywho, Josh Murphy. So, Chelsea advanced to fourth round, where we will get to play Newcastle United. Rafa Benitez returns to Stamford Bridge. That match is in about 10 days, end of the month on Sunday. Hopefully this time it won't take us 2 games to go 1 round. It says, silly replay system, but it would be nice to get the job done in the 4th round against Newcastle. We already beat Newcastle once at the Bridge, so we know we can do it. We can do this. Next up for Chelsea is Saturday, Brighton away, and then midweek before the Newcastle game will be Arsenal in the second leg of the League Cup semi-final, which of course finished 0-0 in the first game. So it's all to play for. Plenty of games, left, right, center. Ross Barkley, I guess, as I forgot earlier, will probably make his debut finally for Chelsea against Brighton. He was going to play in yesterday's game until the club realized that they registered him too late for the first time we played Norwich, and that's what determines the eligibility of players for the replay. So Ross Barkley was ineligible to play yesterday, which is unfortunate, but hopefully he'll make his debut on the weekend. And maybe he'll turn out to be impactful, good player at 15 million and a bargain. At worst, we got nothing to lose, really. So, yeah. So, Brighton on Saturday, and we'll chat with you afterwards. Hopefully we'll score some goals. No more 0-0s, right? We're done with the 0-0s. No more 0-0s the rest of the season. All right.